I'm joined now by my panel, Meredith McGraw, national political correspondent at Politico, Eugene Robinson, columnist for The Washington Post, and Republican strategist Brad Todd. Thanks to all of you for being here. So, Meredith, let's talk about what we heard from President Biden today. He literally said, I want you to remember how you felt on the day that Roe v. Wade was overturned. It was almost an admission that they are losing momentum around this issue. What did you hear?
Yeah, the president's really trying to kickstart the same sort of energy, as you said, that we saw from this summer. And he's trying to make this broader argument among their electorate that they need to be thinking about Republicans pulling back their rights. They need to be thinking about abortion when they go to the polls. And that's really the bet that they're making, is that that's going to be an energizing enough force to overcome what Republicans think. And that's that voters are really just going to be motivated by inflation, by the economy, and by what they're seeing in their bank accounts.
Yeah, and Eugene, if you look at the polls, those issues are really stubborn. They sit at the top of the list for voters. Yeah. Do you think, is there a sense that Democrats have miscalculated, not by talking about abortion, but by not focusing on other issues like the economy and like inflation as much?
Well, you know, the Democrats that I've heard campaigning do talk about the economy. They do talk, you know, they talk about all this stuff, and they frame it in terms of what the Biden administration and Congress have been doing to try to ameliorate inflation. They talk about their longer-term plans. They talk about their, you know, accomplishments thus far. For, you know, 100 days, gas prices were going down, and they talked a lot about that. When they leveled off and crept up a little bit, not so much. But, you know, I agree with the analysis that it was a huge deal. The Dobbs decision was a huge deal. And I am not convinced. I think it's a mistake if Republicans believe, oh, well, that's all past us. That's not going to, you know, that's not going to have any impact. That's just my hunch.
I want to play a little clip from the debate in Ohio last night, and I'm going to get your reaction on the other side, Brad.
Look, there are a number of different exceptions here, and here's the thing that I want to say here is you cannot say with total confidence what every single exception in every single case is going to be. An incest exception looks different at 3 weeks of pregnancy versus 39 weeks of pregnancy. So I actually don't think that you can say on a debate stage every single thing that you're going to vote for when it comes to an abortion piece of legislation.
You would vote for Lindsey Graham's 15-week ban?
As I just said, I think it's totally reasonable to say you cannot abort a baby, especially for elective reasons, after 15 weeks of gestation. No civilized country allows it. I don't want the United States to be an exception.
Brad, do you get this sense that some Republican candidates are still struggling with their messaging around this issue, which we have seen be an energizing factor in places like Kansas and the New York special election?
Well, I think since the Dobbs decision came out, what's happened? Two things have happened. First, the Democrats have spent $97 million on the issue. Republicans have spent less than $1 million. So Democrats have attempted to drive this issue over all others. And meanwhile, the polls now are better for Republicans than they have been at any point since June. So the campaign efforts for the Democrats have failed. I think that's because Democrats themselves staked out a very extreme position. Abortion all the way up into the due date for any reason, at any time, anywhere. That's the least popular position on the scale. If you had Democrats running with a much more middle ground position, this might have been a lot more effective for them. And it's still going to energize their base. It's still going to change turnout some. But it's not changed the fundamentals of the electorate like Democrats hoped.
Yeah, one of the things that you continue to hear Democrats try to make the case, Meredith, is that Republicans haven't put forward a plan to deal with inflation, to deal with the economy. It's notable. Kevin McCarthy, in an interview, said this about one of the ways in which he wants to rein in spending. He said, quote, I think people are going to be sitting in a recession and they're not going to want to write a blank check to Ukraine. Ukraine is important, but at the same time, it can't be the only thing they do, and it can't be a blank check. Is that something that's going to potentially be a winning message 3 weeks until the election? Yes, people are focused on what's happening right here. At the same time, they have also been quite focused on Ukraine and willing to support these funding measures that have passed.
Well, we've been hearing rumblings from Republicans about this for quite some time, about spending in Ukraine. And I think McCarthy is looking forward and is predicting if Republicans do win the House, he's going to have to deal with a conference, a House conference, that is increasingly right-wing and is increasingly America first, has the same sort of Trumpism bent, and is looking for more oversight on spending when it comes to Ukraine. And I think we've seen with McCarthy's statement, really the stark divide in Republican foreign policy on display. You have this, America First wing of Republicans who is saying, whoa, let's, look at how we're spending our money, how we're spending funds over in Ukraine. And then you have some of the more traditional Republicans who, at one point, were competing with Biden to be the more hawkish when it comes to Ukraine.
Well, and that's exactly the point. I mean, Brad, does that type of messaging run counter to the argument that Republicans are hawkish?
No, it's more nuanced than this, right? Republicans are pretty united in being willing to give the Ukrainians advanced weapon systems. But that's not what Joe Biden wants to do. He wants to send checks in cash. And so most Republicans would tell you, send them advanced weapon systems, let Germany send them cash for humanitarian aid. And, everything Joe Biden does costs money. We've already spent $52 billion on Ukraine. Student loan debt reassignment, that costs money. His green energy plants cost money. And Americans are in a time of inflation. They know when the government spends more, it makes inflation worse. That's the fundamental perpendicular problem Joe Biden has.
Eugene, weigh in on this.
Well, those advanced weapon systems cost money. I mean, so it's not like you do that for free. This is really important, actually, because the United States has led NATO and Europe and the rest of the world and kept it united in a way that I think, I've heard many Republicans say it has been really impressive and has been really a good thing for the future of democracies and countering Russia and this brazen attempt to take over Ukraine. Now, if Kevin McCarthy cannot finesse support from his caucus for this continued policy, that has world implications. It really does. And I think back to when, George W. Bush was president, Nancy Pelosi became speaker. She had to fund the Iraq war. She had, and she knew she had to do it. And all her caucus, like her entire caucus, didn't want to do it. She found a clever way to do that, by splitting the legislation into parts, giving people a chance to vote against it, against the war, but for the money, and she got it through.
When I talk to Republicans on Capitol Hill, they say the problem is the Biden administration doesn't give them any input on their Ukraine policy. They just send it over to the Democrat leadership and expect the votes to come in. What Kevin McCarthy said is no blank check. So that means transparency, oversight, focus on military equipment. The administration is going to have to come to Republicans next year.
One of the things, broadly speaking, that we're going to be watching for on election night is the Trump effect. I just talked to Joe O'Dea, who's running in Colorado, obviously, and he's running against former President Trump. But you have all of these candidates, Herschel Walker, Dr. Oz, and J.D. Vance, who we were just talking about, who literally have been backed by Trump, some of them handpicked by Trump. Meredith, what are you seeing in the trend lines there, particularly when you hear from a Joe O'Dea who's still very bullish, not backing down in the face of this criticism from the former president?
Yeah, Joe O'Dea's handling of that has really been interesting to watch. I think with Donald Trump, we're all still watching to see, of course, whether or not he's going to make any kind of announcement soon. And, I think how some of these candidates that he played such an important role in picking, in promoting, how they fare could factor into that calculation and maybe how Republicans view the former president.
We have less than a minute, so very quickly from both of you. What do you think, Brad?
Well, elections are waged in the windshield, not the rearview mirror. We have them about one president at a time, and it's the current president.
The former president is trying to get into the windshield. He's trying to be the future as well as the past. If he succeeds in that, that's good for Democrats.
All right. Well, great conversation by all of you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Great to see you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.